Okay, a little bit more deeper diving here. So, again, yeah, economic criminology, mass modeling. Now, if we go back to try to understand this long term situation that involves the beginning of weaponization of data, we're going to be getting away from our celebration, so to speak, of where we are, but we have to understand our flaws and dark sides. We have to understand about working more and more with supermodel powers. As we're literally confronted with the reality that is here and now manifesting before our eyes. We can go all the way back and we can look at the Prussian staff. We're talking the ultimate war colleges, basically, of it's basically the Royal German Empire. So if we're going to sit there and look at all of these different aspects of how things worked around and how they would get together and do all of these different mappings and considerations and tactical table considerations. We have, the military planning rooms, we have the royal planning, all those different planning rooms and communications that would be done at different levels with different players, different partners, multiple syndicates, a huge category diversity of puppeting and communications. But at the deepest, darkest levels, we have basically there was a team that exceeded 30 military psychiatrists. These guys were skilled in the military arts, and their primary was psychiatry. So these guys are going to think about how to engineer things all the way at the edge. They have the ultimate access to all categories in the Prussian college. And this ends up getting adopted later, further on, in the Royal German Empire. So you have these minds that diabolically oppose. These people have no problem engineering anything from A to Z. This is far beyond just plain battlefield physics. Yeah, so we're looking at stuff. So these guys got a lot of special books up on the walls back there. These special books are very custom items. Today, very, very rare books to get a hold of. So as you have these different planning rooms, and this is only one of many, again, these military psychiatrists are going to engineer propaganda. They're going to engineer literally the financing and creation of child mechanisms, devices of human beings that can effectively be wielded as the weapons of mass destruction, to be able to literally create Marxism, to create communism and socialism, and use these things, just fund them and scale them along as they go, yet have multi-other availability of specialized partners and other syndicates specialized to be partners, 50-50 split. So it's Prussian or German Empire splitting with specialists involving somebody else's key business specialities, or syndicate coordination, multi-organizational businesses, whatever they are, then working with a 50-50 partnership with the device, the child mechanism, let's call it, communism. So Lenin is going to be funded. They're going to send 3,700, I think it went up to 3,800 ops guys. I found extra references that indicated there had to be at least another 100 to basically, infiltrate into Russia and destabilize it, take it over, overthrow it, to get it out of the way so that it's not going to be a problem with their future aspects and designs. We're talking very long-term planning. We're talking about ideas that conceptually were framed out, in some cases, 40 years before they were implemented. Literally entire lifetimes before. A lot of people, they'd only live to 40 and they die. So you have the children working with these plans that have been carried through the recycling of these basic modules or modules actually, where you would have the psychiatrists, these military psychiatrists slash spy guys that are going to do engineering. They're going to do societal engineering, and it has a vast diversity. So they have built-in ways to make money as the mechanism moves along. So, for instance, if we look at Russia, for instance, they're going to be able to move into these territories. They're going to be able to constantly give all kinds of data, knowledge, information, intelligence, so that Lenin can have Joseph Stalin run around and set brand new world records of mass murder, just literally sorting people at unreal speeds, people who would be loyal and willing to do whatever needed to be done. But then you have the specialist. All of the 3,700 basically, or 3,800, they were specialists. They were more like ghost mechanisms. They had special passes. They would be like beyond the SS, so to speak. And they go, oh, you're with the, oh, okay, So these guys are totally credited because they're connected to the guys that are guaranteeing the money no matter what. Saying, look, we're guaranteeing the money, but do these other operations. There's going to be money popping out of this. But we're going to guarantee constantly whatever you need, it's going to be there. So as these mechanisms operate, you have all of these ghost players going and making assessments ahead of time. They're going ahead and they're assessing people, making quick notes. They're associating with different types of people and making friends and seeing who they are. And it's a very big deal. And it's crucial because it's augmented because they end up being able to verify the last sorting sequences as the arrival of the child mechanism shows up, and you start having people getting on soapboxes, they're giving speeches, and other people get upset. You can't be here, we're going to kick you out of town. And then all of a sudden they're confronted by a bunch of, large people. Some of them have guns, saying, no, you're not going to mess with us. So they start hauling people away. And all these people that start to be a problem end up getting, they disappear, they get injured, they get kidnapped. There's a lot of people that were kidnapped temporarily and then released later. And in some cases, they would kidnap people, they'd hold them a while, they'd take them to a different town, and then they'd end up releasing them in a different town. So all of a sudden, these people are released, and they're like a world away with no resources, no identification, in a strange place. So they're eventually going to be able to try to get back to things, but then they're going to be babbling about all the things that happened in another town area where they're like, well, we don't know who you are, you have no ID, we don't have funding, we can't investigate this stuff. You're talking about you were confronted by a large mechanism. So guess what? Local law enforcement is not equipped to deal with these type of people coming up with stories. They make a few notes of it and whatnot. And this ends up becoming crucial information later on that gets retrieved that once again helps them sort out who's who. It's amazing how it works. So you have all these facets, and all along the way there are these criminal exploits. You have people that are going to be murdered, they're going to be robbed, they're going to go to people who have assets, they're antique dealers, they'll do pawn shops, whatever it is, and they will either make friends with them or they will eliminate them or get them out of the way. And so there was a lot of stuff that happened this way. So this is just this huge diversified option machine. I mean, all these options, what's the easiest pathway? Let's try those first. Yeah, let's try those first. If those don't work, then ultimately we can use the ultimate item, which is they just kill you. So you still end up with this vast amount of people that are murdered on a scale it's mind-boggling. And all these assets are moved out of Russia, literally worldwide. And, of course, the Royal German Empire. These are the people that end up basically already having pre-established business routes that they've made with all their other syndicate partners. So they have these spy routes, they have commerce routes, all these routes, master maps, all these ships that they know captains on, where they can bring cargo, no questions asked, there's not going to be any problems. So they end up moving mass quantities of assets from Russia, selling them off worldwide. They appear in auctions, they pop up on bulk business deals, at antique shops worldwide. And so this has got the money chain flowing back in. There's just all this money being made. And a lot of people, they have no information. United States, somebody showed up, they got a huge shipment. This is stuff from Russia. Well, what do you know about it? I don't know. They just have it, they're selling it. So then you're trying to get around the minions of somebody's business to ask them questions. What are you going to do in law enforcement? The guy presents a bunch of paperwork, gives you a bunch of stories, and says, yeah, it's mine. Look, I got all the receipts. What's your problem? And it's like they might try to start giving, well, we think maybe something's wrong here. And meanwhile, they're going to bribe somebody else around town to say, hey, man, we got some business going down, and get these guys off our butts. And all of a sudden, what happens is people come up and say, well, do you have any evidence? Well, it just seems kind of odd. And say, hey, look, no. You don't know what's going on. There's no evidence. Well, they just got here. We don't, how are we going to, you're going to have to stop. Okay. You have no actionable evidence, no reports from other governments. Just don't bother these people. So all these assets are just getting liquidated on mass scales worldwide. And it's incredible. A lot of them are shipped out on trucks. They arrive in warehouses and they end up getting located. They move inland someplace, and there's other businesses, other warehouses, other antique dealers, other business people that are going to do deals, and everything keeps getting traded and liquidated one way or another. And there's nothing like, if you can't sell it for a reasonable amount of money, can you trade it for assets that are untraceable of an equivalent value? That works well too. So you do that, and then you ship those to yet again another place, because now you have fresh receipts that are verifiable from the United States from somebody, and you can ship this stuff again worldwide any place and then liquidate it. So we had mass commerce operations that connect to the origin of mass murder, literally mass murder in Russia. So this big money, you've got all these ways they're making money out of this. And there's all these cuts that end up coming down and going different directions to people to keep things moving along. So it's a very lucrative operation. And these items, again, they were framed out in many cases and designed 40 years before they end up becoming implemented. And it's unclear how many years previous to that somebody else might have had other raw ideas. So in creating these different mechanisms and the different policies, everything from A to Z would have to be created for them to be able to utilize. We're talking about a lot of logistical designs here. If you want to understand the confusion of logistical designs, study the United States in World War II, respective to what we had to do to deal with the logistics of Europe. We had to bring everything. Go ahead and study that for a while. It's massive. So to get an idea of the scaling and design, now we're right back to these tactical tables to try to understand what these guys were doing. So you have all these different rooms, all these different subcategories, all these specialized experts, and you get around to these certain people, the 30-plus people that are military psychiatrists. They're experts in spy and economy and liquidation and theft and murder, everything. Okay? These guys are evil of evil, so to speak. But virtually nobody even knows they really exist and what they actually do. They're very clever at hiding who they are and what they're doing. And they're literally working with other experts. They sub things out. They will attract different specialists, people that, today you could identify them as various high-end scholastic people with PhDs, various types of degrees, and there can be various levels of acquisition respective to the acquiring of information, which could be other people talking about a lot of hypotheticals. So into this, you have this mass amount of stuff coming around, and they're looking from their standpoint that they're in control of engineering the whole thing. So they're going to design mechanisms to say, okay, well, we're going to have to immediately put in forms of government, okay, occupational governance. So as parties overthrow an area, no matter how they do it, whether they take it by force or they do it in a form of election, they're going to bring in packages to say, okay, we want you to run this town this way. We have all this information. So you have all these experts that are consulting on how to get things done. And they have all these other secret operations to extract money. We just talked about a bunch of them. It's bloody. It's deadly in many cases. There's other ways where they just jack people. There's different ways they do that. But if they win an election, in other words, they get successful without having to use force, they're still going to implement. They're still going to implement all of these types of packages because now they have control. They just overtook a small town, a city in an election. So this is something where they are basically now in control of the community, and they're sorting the community as they see fit. And there's a lot of hidden agendas. So when you're going back to this tactical table and you're dealing with the different modules and teams that all connect to the 30-plus psychiatrist, these people are diabolical. They know what they're engineering. They work items and then they sub them out to other modules. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are going to work on the materials so they can understand stuff. And there's no limit. I mean, if they're going to look ahead, they're looking ahead in many cases, designing ahead how to take over different cities, how to manipulate different types of laws, creating everything from A to Z to books that are going to be able to teach people to learn. And as you're working with the child mechanisms, these child mechanisms are receiving all kinds of special materials. They're going to end up getting a whole lot of special designed books. These are custom books. They're rare. This is not a main printing. This is just custom books. And it's going to explain things, and they're carried by extras, by certain experts who keep it for them. And there are other people who will provide security around these types of information until they're sure that they can trust certain people and that they have reasonably secure locations and they can reduce security. So these are these special security guys that are not actually the communists or the socialists. They're specialized Royal German Empire partners. And, this is something that very few people cover in history, because when you get to these design aspects to understand that here, from our standpoint, let's say we jump forward in time here now, okay? And looking back, well, the Royal German Empire has just, kind of faded away. We fought 2 great wars, they faded away. But the child mechanisms that they created continue to evolve and rebirth new organizations. And the material that is the core that guides them in their various operations, techniques, and tactics are these books that go all the way back. So all of this master puppeting is understood. You used to have terms, used to be a frequent term that many Russians would use about other Russians. They would accuse other Russians, oh, they're a puppet of this or a puppet of that, da-da-da-da. So the puppeting thing, the front person, this, that, and the other thing. And you don't see many people use the term puppet anymore. But it was a very real term. Your great-great-grandparents would remember that term. A lot of people would have spoken it in conjunction to the news or the newspaper, this or that. And the United States is also no stranger to being victimized. If we go back in history a bit, there was deep infiltrations. Russia was the number one target of the Royal German Empire. They were the real big concern. They wanted them guaranteed to make sure they were out of their way, so they wouldn't come up behind their back and be a problem, so that they could swoop in and take over everything else in Europe. That was part of the plan. But they looked worldwide. You have Britain. Britain is a huge empire to be concerned with, and the United States, the big, huge, giant resource that's an incredible wild card. Well, actually, the United States was the number 2 target, and they utilized different tactics and techniques because the United States also was a fantastic place to do business. An enormous quantity of assets that was taken from the people that were murdered in Russia as Joseph Stalin ran around murdering people, ended up coming to the United States. New York had vast quantities of antiques and assets that ended up getting liquidated. And this was a feast area, basically, where people were coming in. Oh, we can get a really good deal on these antiques. That's good for business. So you had a lot of people that were buying stuff, and they were acquiring top end antiques and other assets. And the banks were looking at other people who were in the process of wealth building. And you also had a lot of people that, they had coffee. They got together and says, look, we got a lot of stuff happening here. We would really like to make sure that we just, things go smoothly. We'd like to borrow some money from you. And by the way, these people that want to buy stuff, we would like you to continue to financially back those people as well and encourage them to make more purchases, because this is a long-term plan and it's going to keep happening. And this could work out really well for people to acquire vast quantities of assets, that will turn out to be very solid. So you had a lot of bankers that were in the know. They were in the know, so to speak. And they themselves were also building estates. They were also getting special assets opportunity. And of course, all along the way here, you have pharmaceuticals. That was one of the ultimate icebreakers, oh, you need some pharmaceutical. Well, here, just take this, hey, here's 10 pounds of cocaine. Here, just take that. That's okay. So it costs them virtually nothing to make this stuff. But the street value on it was, noticeably something significant. And people also would get, addicted, snuff and, nose perfumes and stuff like this. These things were important because people would stink, so historically there was this long-term understanding of people who wanted a way to numb their nose because they didn't want to deal with the smell problems. So, among other things. And of course, if it made you feel like a new person, that was also wonderful as well. And there's nothing like someone who just realize they feel like a new person after they had this cocaine given to them, and they run into these people again, and their supply is running low, and they're, I don't know. Someone says, well, how are you doing? Well, could you use some more? We'll tell you what, I got some more businesses, but here, you need some more of this. Here, take some more of this. So it's the ultimate icebreaker to help people with their dope addiction, so to speak. And it was legal in many ways. It was, not something was necessarily illegal. And some areas there was some laws, but, still the same. So here you have this mass mechanism working, and to do all of these special operations. The Royal German Empire, the Germans wanted to deeply penetrate. They wanted options. They're like, we want to do business here. We want to put chemical plants. We want to put pharmaceutical companies so they're localized. That would make sense. And we want to, we would love to make some technology here too, maybe some munition plants. So they did this. They did these things. They built munition plants prior to World War I in the United States. We literally had munitions that were made in the United States killing our own people in combat. This is real. This is history. This is real. So we have this huge problem where people are ignoring history, and they're really missing the deep physics of the base of the evidence that goes very deep. Because you also have this other factor, because as things went south, this means all of a sudden a lot of the inside intelligence information became a hush-hush item. Why? It's logical. You don't want your enemy to know how much you know about them. So obviously you're not going to run to the nearest newspaper and say, yes, we found out all this information. Well, these other people are going to bolt. They're going to escape. And you won't get any more chances to get more intelligence because what? You want to understand what they're doing because these people are involved in mass murder, mass theft. This is war. This is not a game. It's real war. So it's crucial to understand the origins of all this material because we literally have psychiatrists designing things such as How do we want people to be groomed? How do we want to groom their brains, their entire psychology? These guys are trying to manipulate universities, colleges. They're engineering everything from A to Z. Mind Control 101? Oh, no. This is Mind Control 901. Okay, this is very advanced. Again, over 30 military grade level psychiatrists. Okay, basically, let me help you gauge this. Hannibal Lecter, the psychiatrist murderer in the films, the character, okay? Imagine him kind of sort of being one of these people, as though all of these people probably were worse. They were far worse than Hannibal Lecter, because the amount of bodies that were created was astronomically more as a number. Okay, so all of this deep engineering of how do you meld and create and move people's mindsets into different zones to create future opportunities so that you can manipulate elections. These are master workings, and master psychiatrists with diabolical intent worked their magic. So if you're going to look at somebody like, for instance, Senator Bernie Sanders, for instance, literally all that he is in his whole life, all of his beliefs, all of his education, all of his evolution and activities and his styles of speeches, all of this has already happened before, again and again and again. This is all in a nutshell. This guy, he's like, it's like everything that Bernie Sanders is actually going to appear someplace in one of these super engineers' books. All this psychiatry, these super books, is going to end up literally in one of the design books. We're talking ultimate design books. I mean, it's like, people that could understand what's going on here would have major psychotic breaks if they understood that there are these books. And myself as an archiver, getting a hold of some of these types of books is really hard. They're very rare, and you have to sort through them. And many times they're damaged. There's only fragments of them. And other times you're working with fragments of notes that other people found. I mean, I'll be looking at materials that other historians found, and I'll read their summation, and I'll look at the note, and I'll go, ooh, I think they missed part of the understanding here. Or they were unwilling to step up and admit what some of those other connotations might actually have meant, because maybe they didn't have the full set of materials, and they didn't want to make a claim without having everything else, together to be supportive, so they don't want to risk their career. They're not going to gamble. So, they're being very conservative about what they're actually saying that way. But literally, I'm going to say to you, everything in engineering people, because they were deliberately engineering child mechanisms. When you're engineering something like Marxism, communism, socialism, okay, it's the same. It's like making a church. It's like making a false religion. People are going to absorb all this material into their heads. They're just going to suck it right into their head, And you see people like this. I don't know how many of you have seen people that they walk around and it's so blatantly obvious and go, wow, that guy walks around, he just like totally sucked Karl Marx in his head. It's so blatantly obvious that this guy's walking around with Marx in his head. It's almost biblical, yeah, there's one, huh? Wow, what a trip. So these people are overthrowing society. These people are criminals. These people are mind controlled. These people are cult members. And everything that they are was engineered by the experts that I'm talking about back in the mid 1800s in the basic framework layout design. We're talking going way back, and it's not a game. It's not a joke. You end up going way back. You have the beginning of weaponization of data and the mass manipulation of data. And you run right into different characters. I'm not saying that there wasn't other players worldwide doing other things, but what we end up seeing manifest and the end up fighting two great wars over how is it? Some people question, did we truly win? Because many of the child mechanisms that were created remain, and they are devastating. In effect, the total death toll all the way together, if you ball everything up, over 300 million people are dead connected to Marxism, communism, and socialism. This is what these child mechanisms have done. They have moved forward as the device that they were designed to actually be and do, and they have evolved. And we have mass death involving these plans and sequences. So when I look at someone like Bernie Sanders, this guy's just another convenient idiot that would be utilized by the design of these mechanisms. Everything that he is was preconceived and designed. He just sucked everything to his head, and he went for it hook, line, and sinker. He did not question it. He did not actually be independent of all of it. So he's this prime example. He's this one guy that's independent, that generally caucuses with the Democrats, and he's like the ultimate sample. He's like the he's not the token black guy, okay? He's the token Royal German Empire Marxist, communist, socialist, mind-controlled individual to look at as an example of somebody utilizing false ethics, because that's his whole thing. Everything has to be ultimate ethics. But then you're going to find the short-sightedness of all of his design sequences that violate tactical table logic. Everything that he is was designed by military psychiatrists basically more than 150 years ago. No joke here, more than 150 years ago. So, that's his whole life. He's a product of somebody else's design. There's nothing really truly independent about it. His consciousness is as though a false instillment. He is possessed basically by a form of Marxism. So it's important to see this. So understanding the vast diversities of these massive mechanisms gives you the ability to understand omnibus mass characterization scope, where you can actually understand mass communications and mass pumpeting mechanisms. So I thought that I'd bring that out so that you could get a better understanding of what we're working with respective to the mass model quantitative formula systems that we're working with, because everything is quantitative, basically. So, is God quantitative? Actually, God is quantitative, but if I told you that no matter how much you look, what you might end up finding is the truest, purest, true core of quantization is a living energy God and is God, ultimately. And it's been in pre-existence since the very beginning. But some people would say, well, that's weird. Now you're believing in spirits and natural spirits and evolution of energies. And, well, that's spiritual physics. That gets in very, very deep to understand and explain that. I've got some stuff every so often. I'll put a little bit out on it as to what the quantitative logic systems are on that, and to understand all of the different diversities that are there and how things work. But basically, so, there's no way that I'm ever going to walk up and say stuff negative to people that are, Judeo-Christian believers, because they are truly trying to always get to the true core. They actually are. So this is a personalized journey for most people. And there's a lot of personalized aspects, again, personalized for you. But when you're dealing with some of these other parties, these are preconceived cogs. These are mechanisms that are designed by men. And these are not true natural items. These were designed to be wielded, these organizations, as devices that can be scalable, and in fact are including weapons of mass destruction. And that's exactly what has occurred. And you look at the death tolls, and it is massive. So it's important to understand this, because this all fits deeply into the needed understanding of colonial constitutional capitalism and the mass tactical table of what we did, how we proclaimed, and how it all meets respective to the entire world physics of mass economic modeling. And of course, the obvious understanding of economic criminology, because that's what we have to stop. We have to stop mass economic sabotage. By the way, that's treason. So when we connect all the dots and we see how these people connect and what they're doing, it's very actionable. It quantitates very well with mass computers, very, very well. And we need to begin the process of the final implementations of proper mass model economic stimulus super software systems, as well as implementing economic criminology so that we can begin apprehending these people who are criminals, regardless of what it is, whether they're just a mind-controlled party or whatever it is. They're damaging people. They're murdering people. The mass economic engineering that they're doing is causing deaths. California is full, literally, of crimes against humanity all over the place. It's genocide, and we have to address it. Not tomorrow. We need to begin today.